I think we're going to get started even while you guys are signing up, so keep on. And I'm honored that so many people, so many students from, I guess, Norm Cure's class, right? So you all know about economics. I got to really worry. There'll be a test afterwards. Where is he? I'm doing his job for him. No. For those of you who are here as students, let me just tell you a little bit about this so you know what's going to happen. Every year for the last 30 years or more, almost 30 years, I've been asked by the Chamber of Commerce to do an economic forecast. So this is a kind of exercise that I put together looking at the local economy. Now, I do talk about national things and state issues as well, but we really concentrate on, Macomb County. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I give this forecast in January. So, and I really haven't changed anything, but I'll add as I speak. I'll add a little bit about it. But it has a certain pattern, and I want to kind of go over that just so you know. We'll start on the national level, and we'll move to state and county trends, and then we'll talk about economic issues in Macomb County. Oh, there he is. I was a little worried you wouldn't show up and send all your students here. And then we'll talk about a forecast, and forecast means just what should be unfolding in the next couple of in the next year in Macomb County. And then at the end, I talk about what's called wild cards, and wild cards only mean these are things which in the economy could change some of the forecasts that we don't know, really what's going to happen. Now, let me first also say a few more things, because a lot of you are students of economics, all in macro or micro or both? Both. Both, okay. This is really macro. This is the big picture, and it is done primarily by one reading, there's no inside information here, no huge stock tips or anything like that. You can go see your teacher about those questions. But there is a lot of information that I do gather on the local level on Macomb County. So really, and the purpose of this is to really look at how the economy is doing here. So this is, and the reason to do that is, as you know, right now with computers, you can get thousands of pieces of data from the internet. You can look at the internet and find out, exactly what the car sales are for last month, or you can find out, the price of, futures of corn in the next, 10 years. And if you want to know exactly how many oil wells are in North Dakota, you can know all this. So we get lots and lots of economic facts, more facts than we've ever had before. The real problem is to try to fit it into some kind of theoretical understanding and look at what are the facts that are really important about understanding the economy. Now, why is that important? Well, for obvious reasons, it's important for the future of the country, and it's also important for your futures. I mean, basically, all of us have to make economic decisions, and really, it's not even a question of investments like bonds and stocks and that kind of thing, but it's also just a question of how you live your life. What kinds of jobs you think are possible. What schools you go to and how much you pay for school, when you get married and who you marry, what house you buy. All those kind of things, which are day-to-day decisions, are really based around understanding a little bit of the economy. And really, if you get those decisions right, you do fairly well as an individual or a family. But if you make incorrect decisions, it becomes very difficult. So I really applaud all the students here in economics. It's really an important subject. It's a personally important subject. So with that little background, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of go over the material, and certainly if we'll leave time for questions. If something is really important that you need to know right away, just raise your hand and we'll kind of try to answer it. But this will take about maybe 25, 30 minutes, but we'll have enough time afterwards for questions. All right, so let's start with, we're going to start again. We're going to go right down using that kind of organizational principle. We're going to start talking about the national economy. And again, and what we do is we look backward. We look at 2012. And in 2012, we clearly saw the economy continuing its very slow and kind of not very glamorous economic recovery. Despite the fact that we had contradictory, national policies. On the one hand, you had the Federal Reserve really having very, very low interest rates almost at zero, really trying to expand the economy by its actions. At the same time, you had lots of states and also the federal government engaging in cutbacks and holding, budgets down. So they were kind of contradictory policies. The gross domestic product still grew, and grew at a little over a 2% rate. In the third quarter, over 500,000 jobs were created. December was the last employment figures, 155,000 jobs created. Inflation was still very low, less than 2%, 1.8, 1.9. The revenues that were being accumulated really shrank the formal deficit down to about 7% of the gross domestic product. But we still have a huge long-term deficit of over $7 trillion, which is about 79% of the gross domestic product. But growth, steady growth, modest growth. Expansion of banking and financial sectors, but also manufacturing up through the third quarter. Now, one sort of downturn, and you can see that now with some of the recent figures, Christmas sales, which had been anticipated to be 5%, 4 to 5%, were a little bit less than that, less than 4%. So there was a kind of consumer sentiment decline at the very end of 2012. Some of that people think has to do with the feelings of insecurity because of the current national budget crisis. But some of that may be more structural. Some of that is also, again, we look at different events, and the event like Hurricane Sandy and the impact on Christmas sales in the Northeast was significant enough to hurt the gross domestic product. So we've had growth since 2010. That growth has been important in terms of recovery, but still that growth is very fragile. It's still an economy which is only moving at a very slow pace. To give you a sense of that, you want to look at other countries. China, in terms of its economic growth last year, had its lowest rate of growth in over 20 years, but that was an 8% rate of growth. I mean, huge difference. So we have a very fragile beginning in our gains. The employment picture is good if you look at jobs being created, but not so good in terms of wage increases. Wage increases have been extremely low. And to compound that, in the very near future, Europe, as well as parts of Asia, are going to, in particular Europe, is seeing a clear downturn and decline, and Asia is mixed in its reaction. And I guess the most important thing for us to consider on the national level is, what happens with our settlement of the big crisis of the federal budget whether we're going to see a resolution which, in the long run, produces some decline in the amount of revenue that we are, the amount of deficit that we have, as well as increases in the short run, economic growth. That question of how we settle that has been deferred, as you know, until March, and we'll see what happens in the in the near future. So those are some of the issues. Now, let's now bring it down a little bit, though. So that was on the national level, now to the state and local level. Actually, for the last 2 years, and 2012 continued that for 3 years now, our local growth has exceeded our national growth. That because of the auto industry and the response of the auto industry, we actually have seen more growth locally and in Michigan as a whole. If you looked at all the metropolitan areas of the United States, the Detroit metropolitan area was the third or the second leading growth area in the country in 2012. It's hard to believe. And again, that growth is based on manufacturing. It's based on auto in particular. So in compared to states, Michigan now is actually emerging better than many other parts of the country. To use an example, we often compare ourselves to southern states. We say, well, the unemployment rate in southern states is lower, the job creation is greater, et cetera. Well, if you took South Carolina, the unemployment rate in South Carolina is 9.2%. In Michigan, it's 8.7%. So there's a difference now working the other way. So in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen considerable growth in our local economy. Now, let's kind of disaggregate that a little bit. First, some of that, of course, is based around auto sales. In 2012, auto sales were 14.5 million vehicles. That's a 13% increase from 2011, and that's 40% more than in 2009, when it was the lowest point in the last decade. In Michigan alone, auto production in 2012 rose to 2.26 million vehicles, its highest level since 2007. So you're seeing, and that's producing jobs. In the state as a whole, we're looking at about 110,000, jobs created. Most of those are in manufacturing and the auto industry. Couple of interesting points. As a result of that, in the last 2 or 3 years, the population in Michigan, for the first time in a decade, has actually, since 2004, has actually gained population as a state. In other words, the old trend of individuals leaving the state because they were in search of jobs is now starting to be reversed. About 57,000 jobs were created last year, half probably in auto. The per capita income in Michigan rose to 37th in the country, and that was from 40th in 2011. We still have a huge issue, and that is the decline in government employment and the resulting spending that will occur as a result of that decline. A good deal of this is based around the changes in the tax policies of the present Governor Schneider. 2 years ago, with the elimination of the Michigan business tax and the changes in some of the tax laws, Michigan as a state is taking in about $1.8 billion less money from taxes than it was 3 years ago, which results in less money coming into the state coffers, which has an effect on all of us, including this college, on education, et cetera. So business tax revenues are down 84%. The second thing is that there has been a decline in certain kinds of spending, and let's just use the one that we're all familiar with. You look at Michigan and North Carolina as states which are somewhat similar in population. They're different in their economies, but they're also similar in terms of having manufacturing. Michigan is much more centralized around auto. But if you ask the question, how much do each state spend on higher education? In Michigan, we're spending about $1.2 billion in higher education. North Carolina is spending $3.6 billion in higher education. So states are making a difference in terms of where they put their money. And one of the concerns in Michigan is that while there's growth, whether that money is now being used, for roads, for schools, for other things is another question. The good news is that auto sales will continue to increase in 2013. Most of and remember what I just said, that the auto sales were about a little over 14%. Most of the models predict automobile sales this coming year in 2013 between 15 and 15.2 million units. One of the reasons for that has to do with the fact that we have the highest at this point, historically, the most numbers of years, average year that individuals are driving cars has increased now to 11 years. That's the highest on record. Plus, there's been a huge restructuring of the auto industries, and we can talk about that maybe later on in terms of specifics, but what that means is that General Motors, Ford, Chrysler all make money at much lower levels of production than they ever have before. So that means huge profitability. You can see that last week the profit-sharing check for all Ford workers was over $8,000, the highest it's been ever. If you look at that in terms of what it means over a historical period, this is motor vehicle parts and employment for since 1999 through September 2012. And to look at the lines, the red line is all the United States, but the blue line is Michigan. And you can see that the decline, which is a huge decline overall, 42% in the United States as a whole, Michigan a 56% decline from 1999. But since July of 2009, the United States auto employment has increased 24%, Michigan up 33%. And these states, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, are the three key states with large numbers of people working, obviously, in the auto industry. And the forecast indicates that that's going to continue to mean growth in jobs. The vehicle production, this is a chart which gives you the vehicle production on the bottom, but also the blue line is the automobile employment, again, in Michigan as a whole. And you can see that since 2010, it's at 126,000, and by 2013, 167,000. So that's a 50,000, increase in jobs. And what's interesting about the auto industry is that probably will not mean too many more plants, but it means a third shift, and that's occurring in a couple of facilities in Macomb County. It means automobile manufacturing is changing. A lot more parts are made outside the big factories and brought into factories, which means you can make 2 or 3 smaller assembly lines inside the same building. So we're seeing much more concentration of the present automobile industry. One of the issues long term is, okay, is it a good thing that Michigan's economy is so closely tied to the auto industry? And one of the reasons why Governor Schneider made some of the changes in the tax laws was to encourage businesses to invest in Michigan with new products and new services. As yet, the jury's still out on that. If you look at these 2 lines, the first line is the Michigan per capita income. That's the dark line. The dotted line is Michigan motor vehicle production. And you pretty much see both of those lines moving kind of together, especially in the early period, for sure, between 1982 through, let's say, 2000. And then we started to see a little bit of a, space between those two lines. But you still now, in general, the curve, the per capita income rises sort of as automobile production. So we're still very, very much a state that's dominated, by the auto industry. So our recovery is really based around that. Let's now go down to Macomb County and talk a little bit. And here you have some very interesting things. This is employment in Macomb County, and the 2 or 3 big areas of employment are, of course, manufacturing, construction, and what could be called healthcare and social, which is mainly hospitals, medical care, etc. Retail trade plays also a big role in the county, as it does everywhere else. But the key one is manufacturing. Now, this is private sector employment only, so there's no government sector involved in this. So when you see education services, we're not talking about public schools, we're talking about private schools, etc., which is why the number is so small. But manufacturing, look at the difference from 2000 to 2012, actually 43% loss in jobs. This county was very, very heavily a manufacturing county. Construction down 41%. The growth, you can see, is in healthcare and a little bit in some of the other areas. But if we took this same chart and not compared to 2000, but to compare to 2010, you would see pluses in all those boxes. In other words, it's minus over the long term, but it's clearly an upwardly moving in the last two years. That employment in manufacturing has increased, and employment in construction has increased. This is the kind of important to look at it over this last 2-year period. For the first time, we're seeing the labor force actually decline, but the number of people employed increase. Now, this gets, as you know, into something interesting. I mean, everybody talks about the unemployment rate, and that's at the bottom. And the unemployment rate in Macomb County went down from 12.3% to 9.4% in the last 2 years. And the number of unemployed as a group went down 25%. But what's most important is the number of employed, because that really tells you how many people are working. And that, for the first time, since actually since 2007, this is the first increases that we've seen in any way. That's a key indicator of some growth in the county. Now, where's that growth been especially important? It's been especially important in manufacturing. New shifts have been added to a number of facilities. The Chrysler plant, the Dodge truck plant in Warren will add 1,000 jobs in 2013 as a second shift comes in. General Motors has added people at the Tech Center and also at the and Ford at both its Van Dyke and Mound facilities. So in auto alone, approximately 6,000 jobs were added. The defense sector also continues to expand. One of the other pieces of Macomb County's economy is not only is there automobile manufacturing, but there's significant defense manufacturing. And in fact, if and those of you who know this, in Warren sits the U.S. Automotive Tank Command and its research group, TARDAC. TANCOM is spends over $1 billion in local contracts to employers to produce some of the defense materials. CANCOM itself, in 2000, had 2,000 employees. Now, in 2012, has 8,000 employees. So it's expanded enormously in the county, which is, again, these are jobs that are creating income and creating growth. So part of what we're seeing in Macomb County is manufacturing starting to rebound. This defense corridor is very important to us. Not only is, and again, that defense corridor that we're talking about is between Mound Road and Van Dyke, all the way from 11 Mile right through up to Hall Road. If you go drive along Van Dyke, you will see General Dynamics. You will see BAE Systems, which is a British firm, which is a major contractor. And not only are they coming to this area, but they're bringing their supplier groups. So you see Navstar, Oshkosh, other organizations that make various parts of military equipment. The college, Macomb, has done a lot of work with these companies. And last year alone, in a Department of Labor grant that we had, over 1,000 people were placed in jobs in manufacturing. So there's a lot of work going on in this area. The expansion in auto, GM is hiring 70, and actually this is 1,500, and that's a typo, and that's 75, 1,500 IT workers at the tech center. The Ford transmission and axle plants investing over $168 million this next year. So all this stuff is continuing. This is some figures, again, that gives you a sense of what companies were hiring and what jobs are retained. That's all of 2011, and then for the first 6 months of 2012. So we're running at a much higher capacity than ever before. So all of this is to say that we're doing a lot better. However, because of the recession, we have a long, long way to go. Now, this is residential sales of homes, and this is, again, a key part of the local economy, not only the construction of new homes, but, of course, the sale of present homes. So what you see here is a chart which has the number of homes sold privately, the percent of homes sold and their average sale price, and then the number of homes sold by the bank, which is normally a kind of statistic which indicates these are foreclosed homes, these are homes that have been taken over by banks, etc. So you have a lot of stuff going on here, but just to quickly kind of summarize it, what you see is that the number of homes sold by banks has been declining from a high point in 2009 of 52% down to 36%, and the number of private homes increasing, so more home sales. And the price of the home has begun to rise for the first time in 2012, which is, again, important for the future growth of the economy. But the price clearly is still much lower than it was in 2007. So homes are being sold, being turned over, but the price of those homes is much less, which means a considerable amount of people still in the county have homes that are, what we use the phrase underwater, that the value of the home is less than, the mortgage that it has. So the real foreclosure crisis is sort of over. For the last 2 years, there's been less homes foreclosed in Macomb County each month than there was the month before. But overall, prices still remain relatively low. Now, it's not true in all parts of the county, and we can talk about that a little bit later on if you want. Residential permits are only now beginning to recover. This is new buildings, so when you build a new house, you take out a permit. And in general, this is a sign of future growth because obviously to build a house, you have to have individuals being paid to do that. A new home means somebody's going to be buying appliances and all that. So it's a big economic boost. You can see in Macomb County, in 2009, there was only 346 building permits. Now it's up to 1,300. Oakland County runs a little bit higher. Wayne County is lower than Macomb County. Shelby Township and Macomb Township and New Baltimore are the three big communities that have the most new residential buildings. What does this mean? This means that, as you see, new homes being constructed and the value of homes in different communities means that local projected tax assessments are going to be different. And you can look at different communities here, and you actually see for the first time in the last couple of years, positive growth. Macomb Township, Shelby Township, but still many other parts of the county, the actual value of the property assessed is lower than it was the year before, and that's what these negative percentages mean. So we're studying a mixed relationship in terms of housing. Several other things that we look at in the county, one, educational data, and this is from high schools, and some of you, may be interested in this. It's really a sign that Macomb high schools do relatively well compared to statewide data. And you can see the statewide data, the amount of people, graduates who are going to higher education, statewide it's 71%. Macomb County, these are all public schools, 88%. The number of higher education remedial class enrollments from statewide data and from Macomb County school data. Again, this is material from the intermediate school district. However, again, this is, we still have to look at how far we need to go. This is median household income, and household means any individual even living alone, that's a household. This is not family. Families are blood relations. Households are any kind of individuals living in a dwelling. You look at in 1999, look at 2010, and look at the change in income. In Macomb County, there's a 27% drop in median household income. Compare that to Oakland County, which had a 25% drop, Wayne County, a 26% drop, Michigan as a whole, 22%, and the United States as a whole, 8.9%. So, relatively speaking, there's still a decline in incomes. So when you think, or your family thinks, things are tougher, the answer is yes. Incomes have declined, which means there's less money for certain kinds of disposable income, etc. So good news is that we're moving in the right direction in terms of the economy. The problem is that we still have a long, long way to go. Again, this is the same data taken not by household, but by a per capita personal income. This is a little different than household income. Per capita income tends to be a little higher. And you see Oakland County, a little lower, Oakland County and Wayne County. And you see also the gap between the counties, between Macomb and Oakland, or Macomb and Wayne. And we're moving more in tandem with Wayne County and less in tandem with Oakland County. Some of that downturn you can see also in terms of just things like the amount of people who are in the Family Independent Agency, the average salaries of people who go through job programs, the amount of people served by our Michigan Works, which is the workforce development area for the county. And you can see that change. Up in 2009, there was over 117,000 people who were in that being served there. That's a little bit less now, down, in fact, quite a bit less, down to 45,000. This is the food stamp caseload in the county. And again, when you think about this, keep in mind that the population in Macomb County is 840,000 people. And this is the distribution of food, which still is an enormous issue. Look at the amount of households, again, so these are households, not individuals, households, or individuals, and again, 840,000 people in the county, 187,000 people being served in food distribution. That's a significant number in the number of pounds distributed. So all of that is some of the economic factors that we follow in looking at the economy. Now, there are other factors that are really important, and that is the image of the county and the way in which the county has developed as not only an economic community, but also how it fits within the metropolitan area. And for years, this has been a county where it's been heavily decentralized. There have been, 20 different cities, and the county commissioners were 26 people, and there was no county executive. In 2010, the voters changed that form of government in Macomb County. We now have a county executive. We have 13 commissioners. We've half the size of the commission and added a county executive. That's had a huge change in the relationship of the county to the rest of the metropolitan area. It has meant that there's now a face in Macomb County, the county executive, Mark Hackle, former sheriff of the county. Also, Mark was a graduate of Macomb, also worked here as a faculty member for years. He has done a great deal of just image building in the metropolitan area. And you can see that in a variety of ways, and later on we might want to talk a little bit about that. We've also started to see in the county clearly designated brands that are occurring. So you have the Defense Corridor, you have the Nautical Mile on the off of Jefferson on the lake. Near our center campus, Garfield and M59, we have Henry Ford Hospital, and now it's Henry Ford and Beaumont merged, double hospital. We have our university center, which has 8 four-year institutions, as well as Michigan State's Osteopathic Medical School. We're starting to see that area being branded as a education and health and wellness center. So what you're starting to see is that for the first time in the county, distinctive pieces which are getting recognized metropolitan area. What that means is that the county is starting to attract interest from other parts of the metropolitan area. All of that, I think, becomes very, very important. 2 kinds of specific events occurred last year. The support for regional transportation, that's buses and the regional transportation system by the county, was instrumental in getting the legislature and the governor to support that, as well as the vote for the Detroit Institute of Arts to establish a regional funding source for the institute. Now, does that mean that everything is fine in Macomb County, that we're just going to move ahead? The answer, of course, is no. We're really close next year to, if we continue to increase auto sales, if we are up at 15.2 million, we may go up to 16 million units. Pretty much that will peak at a certain point. And most importantly, it's not just how many cars are produced and automobiles are produced, but how many of them go to the domestic original equipment manufacturers and how many of them go to the transplants or foreign manufacturers. So that question of the market share becomes really important. And dependence on auto alone is not going to be sufficient to continue the growth past 2013 to 2014 or 2015. Second, a big issue affecting all of us, both nationally but certainly in Macomb County, is what's going to happen with health care. It will create jobs because more people will enter the health care arena for services, because they will be the health care law will change in 2014. But what that will do to the kinds of services, to the expansion of that, will they enter in Macomb County, will they go to Oakland County? All of that is still important issues. So we have real interesting challenges in that. And one very important change that occurred at the very end of 2012, which we're going to see now in 2013 and 2014, is the merger between Beaumont and Henry Ford Hospital, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. Third, as I mentioned, housing has improved in prices in certain areas of the county, but it hasn't improved in all areas of the county. In fact, there's a growing gap, and that gap between the southern end of the county and the northern end of the county does present some significant issues, which I'll get to in a second. And finally, we still have large differences in cities and their ability to work with each other to solve problems. Transportation cuts across Warren, East Point, Roseville. Transportation needs, housing needs, yet the cooperation between the various cities is still something that needs to develop. Let me just spend a little bit of time on health care for a second. The assumption is there will be about 67 to 80,000 more people covered under health care with the new 2014 Affordable Federal Medical Health Act. The merger between Henry Ford and Beaumont will create local headquartered institutions, about a $6.2 billion group of hospitals, employing about 40,000 people. That alone puts a huge player into the Macomb County market that's significant, really very, very important. But the future is also going to depend on what kinds of trends, and as we move away from hospitals into more wellness, how that actually affects our health care. We have significant issues behind that, and I just want to show you really, this is startling, some of the differences here. This is healthcare costs by country: United Kingdom, Germany, Sweden, U.S., and Spain. What you see here is that generally healthcare costs are pretty similar, and this bottom is the age, so as people are younger, generally the costs are about the same. But look at what happens at about age 55 or 60 to healthcare costs in the United States. It shoots way up. Why? Because in many of these other countries, the wellness and prevention of healthcare concerns is the purpose of the system. In our country, for years, the purpose of healthcare was if you had an emergency, you went to the healthcare system. That we didn't do the wellness and we didn't do the issues of care for one's health as a part of the healthcare system. So we have issues of obesity. We have issues of inadequate diets. And again, Macomb County is one of those areas where even in Michigan as a state, but Macomb County within Michigan has large numbers of people who have inadequate diets, are not exercising regularly, are smoking, all the kinds of characteristics which, if you take them over a lifetime, end up in this kind of issue. So how well we take on wellness in the county becomes an important long-term feature of our economic future. Now, the second issue, which is very important in the county, and is the north-south issue. And here we have something which is very interesting. If you look at the economic assets of the county, you look at where the General Motors Tech Center is located, where Dodge Truck and the various plants along Mound Road, where Tancom and Tardac are, at 11 Mile. Most of the large economic assets of the county are located in the south end. The south end of the county also has the largest number of younger residents, under 18, but also the largest number of senior residents, over 60. So you have two big and if you looked at social services, housing prices, schools, etc., there's a huge difference between what's going on in the south end of the county and the northern end of the county, despite the fact that the southern end of the county has the large economic investments. How well we can come to grips with those changes is an important point for future growth of the county. You can't continue to grow and spread the county northward without dealing with the southern part of the county, particularly, and I'll just say it, this institution has the same issue. We have our south campus down at 12 Mile, our center campus at Hall Road. How we continue to operate together becomes an important challenge. So what we do need to emphasize is that the county is becoming more and more an economic resource and power within the communities. That marketing does pay off for the county. Businesses are attracted here. New investments are occurring because the county is getting recognized. That there is a sharing of resources. The county has set up an emergency communications response system, which a number of cities are now working together, saving their costs and pooling their, and developing, what many of you know as economies of scale. Maintaining a vision of how we work together in the county becomes really important for future economic growth. So let me get to continue. Now let's talk about the forecast. The recovery is going to continue through 2013. As long as auto sales continue to grow and its impact will, and the domestic share of that, that is the amount of sales that go to General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford will continue to rise. That will be very beneficial to the county. Housing sales are going to increase. As long as that pipeline is there. And here's where, again, the south end and north end of the counties play a huge role. If there's huge differences in pricing, people are not going to be able to buy homes, sell them, and move upward and sort of like develop a pathway to increase their size of their houses, the stock of their houses, etc. There's going to be increase of opportunities in business, particularly as the automobile industry moves into areas of information technology, smart cars, etc. The lack of income does cut back consumer spending. Businesses that are heavily dependent on consumer spending, be it restaurants or small retail, are going to suffer some still slower recovery. But for the forecast, Macomb County is going to do better than the national economy. Our unemployment rate will drop below 9%, down to 8 and it was in Macomb County alone, our unemployment is about a little over 9%, dropped down to 8.5. Inflation will probably be again around 1.8. We don't see any huge growth in inflation. We're going to see certainly a recovery in housing and a recovery in the Northeast as some of the investment that will go into replacing housing and autos and other things that were lost in Sandy, Hurricane Sandy will play a role. There will be a downturn in demand for products from Europe, which is going to create a certain kind of drag. And certainly the lack of wage increases will make the growth less than it could be. But Macomb County is going to do pretty well. Let me end by just kind of going over some of the wild cards. The first and most important one is what happens on the federal level. And we don't have the time to get into all of this, but you have the Congress and the President at odds with one another over how to deal with the government spending and the deficit. The goal should be to have short-run expansion, which is going to create growth, jobs, etc., which then leads to long-term revenues that will cut back the deficit. How that gets worked out is very, very important. Now, it looked like a month ago that there would be huge problems occurring in the economy in March when the deadline is reached for the budget sequestration. On the other hand, now it looks like it's been pushed off. And if you notice what's happened with the stock market last week, the stock market has increased enormously because there's a lot of confidence. How well that resolution occurs and when it occurs, and if it doesn't occur, there'll be a huge downturn. So that's a big wild card. The whole healthcare implementation law, how it affects businesses, how it affects part-time workers, that is just an unknown, and that, again, will have an impact. Our auto sales always has an impact, but where that auto sales happens, what kinds of companies, what kinds of models emerge, and how much is that related to energy costs becomes an interesting question. One of the big changes in the United States economy, which we didn't have time to get into, is that we now produce domestically far more barrels of oil than we ever have in the last 2 decades. That's significantly changed for us, our energy paradigm. A very important question that, again, is not resolved is what happens to the city of Detroit. And here we have an interesting issue. The city of Detroit is doing very well on a certain level. New people are attracted to living downtown. Restaurants are open. Those of you who go downtown on a regular basis know there's a certain kind of livelihood and thriving that's going on. At the same time, the city is bankrupt. There's no money to fix things like Belle Isle and other parks. The mayor just announced the closing of a number of different parks. If the city is allowed to continue to decline and go bankrupt, that will affect the metropolitan area. And finally, and this is one which many of you may know about if you live near the water, we have very low water levels in the Great Lakes. What that means economically is that Macomb County is a sub-part, an important sub-part of our local economy is the boating, fishing, and recreation industries that are all centralized around Lake St. Clair and the Detroit River. If Lake St. Clair, and to give you an idea, coming up next year is an important fly fishing national tournament that's going to be held on Lake St. Clair. That will bring in $2.5 million of revenue. If water levels continue to decline and boating is not possible and other activities are not as easy to do, that's going to cut into marinas and other activities in the local level. So, and it was interesting that last week Governor Schneider talked about the need to do something about the to do dredging to deal with the low water levels in the lake. So. The answer then just quickly how we're doing better than we have before. The economy is growing. The economy locally is growing faster than the national economy. That's the good news. The not so good news, it's very, very heavily dependent on auto and auto sales. It's still very fragile. And we have big differences in some areas of the county doing very, very well and other areas of the county doing not so well. So why don't I stop at this point and certainly answer any questions people have, and I did this right before 1 o'clock. Yeah, Norm.
You mentioned manufacturing.
Yes.
If students are interested in an internship or a co-op job, who would they go to find?
They would go to our Office of Career Services, Bob Pincala, down here in Arbill, yeah. And actually, yeah, there are jobs. There are jobs, and there are good co-op experiences. And one of the things about, since you mentioned it, if I could, one of the things about manufacturing is that we're now seeing, a different kind of manufacturing emerge. Again, think about how many people here went to the auto show? People didn't go to the auto show. What you would have seen if you went to the auto show. What's the emphasis? Well, 2 years ago it was on electric cars, sustainable. Now the emphasis is on what? The smart car, right? And that's the big, media hype is on the cars that don't driverless vehicles, right? That's a little probably unlikely in the near future. But what is likely is that automobiles now are going to have lots of technology within them that's going to prompt individuals. Say you drive, you have certain credit cards in your pocket, and you drive by a gas station, the automobile knows you have a credit card for that gas station. Inside your car, there will be a prompt that will say, hey, you're at a quarter tank of gas, and there's all that kind of stuff. Basically using social media strategies and placing them inside of automobiles. That's all going to be done here. The programming, the conceptual thinking about that, all that stuff. That's being done. That's why General Motors is focusing on these center of IT jobs here. So for those of you who are like saying, well, I don't really want to go into manufacturing because it's dirty, etc., think about that. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to go on in manufacturing that are very interesting, that the kinds of skill sets that people have here will certainly be important. Questions? Any other questions? Why don't we just take, yes.
You mentioned some about the lakes.
Yes.
Do we, in our community, have anything like awareness or any programs or anything to offer more education on what we can do to help with that?
You mean at Macomb, at the community college, or in a community?
Anywhere in this community.
Lots of things. I mean, first, the county executive has been pushing the lake and the Clinton River, and the Clinton River watershed, as a big source of both recreational activities. We have a huge boating and marina industry, and seeing this as even Lake St. Clair as a tourist destination. Now, you might say, well, what kind of people would come to Lake St. Clair? Well, it's interesting to see how many, they've now for the first time done surveys of this, how many people come from Indiana and Ohio to experience the Great Lakes, and coming up I-75 and going to Macomb County is very, very simple to do if we promote that. And that's where, again, the question comes up, an interesting one, which is public access to the lakes and what we do around it. So there is now some stuff going on, and college is also involved in that. The whole issue of what's going to go on with the Great Lakes as a source of tourism is a very important one for us in the future, and we should be playing a role. Yeah.
I remember hearing about an offer made to sell the lake.
Yeah.
Was that a serious offer? Does that help tourism? If they made that into a vacation?
I mean, it was there are a couple of options. One option is that, I don't know how serious it was. It's been sort of rejected. The other option is to make it a state park of some sort, which then puts, again, public access. The thing about buying the island would have made it a private, place, which would have been, it may have some problems on access. But I think that's not going to happen. I think, though, doing something to make the whole waterfront and the lakes a much more attractive areas is, I think it's starting to happen for the first time. And there's some real opportunities there, I think. Yes?
After the change, after what Steiner did with the business tax,
Yeah.
and the changes that are coming to individual tax,
Yeah.
do you think he's doing that to make up for the loss?
You mean?
Because there are so many changes in the state tax and the write-offs.
Yeah.
For the individual, and are they trying to compensate that way? Because it's really going to discourage a lot of individuals from all of their charitable contributions in the state. I was just curious.
Yeah, this is you're raising an important point. What he's done basically is given huge tax decreases to businesses and stuff, and then raised, and then shifted the burden to individuals. Now, here's the theory behind it. That's when you say, well, why did you do that? Again, the theory is that by reducing the taxes on businesses, et cetera, new industries will be attracted to come here, which will create more jobs, Yet to be determined. Yet to be determined. There is a significant question, what that does yet to the incomes of people, particularly when you're taxing, let's say, senior citizens' pensions, et cetera, and what's going to happen with all of that. And I think that kind of uncertainty, raises some real serious issues. The second thing, and I should have mentioned this in the talk, but something, again, to keep in mind is that, the automobile industry is growing and new jobs are being created. But the average wage of those jobs is a little bit less than what existed before. So you're trading jobs that may cost $23 or $24 in wages to those that are $15 and $16. And so the impact of that on consumption, et cetera. Now, what that also means is that education becomes very important, and the price of education becomes important, and the price of medical care becomes important. So the state is doing better, but there's still, you're right to raise that question. And, just my personal opinion is that we have not, the growth that we've seen, we would have had you not changed those taxes, essentially. So I think we're up against it. I'm going to stop here to make sure for those of you who had, who are coming here for an hour that you can, and for those of you who want to stick around, we can talk some more. So let's take a 5-minute quick break. Thank you.